What is stress? Tough question. But what prompted me to make this video, or this tutorial, was an article placed by the Block Center in Evanston, Illinois. The article, which I'll put a link to here, the article spoke of ways to fight or prevent cancer. And it went through a pretty, you can read it yourself, but the number 3 bullet point was to take care of psychological stress. And anybody who follows me knows that I always try to incorporate thinking, eating, and activity as far as changes in lifestyle to get you to 90 years of age with as little medicines and surgeries as possible, and also living happy. Eating and activity can be really changed without seeing a doctor in some cases. The thinking part's tough. I think there's still a stigmata out there about people admitting that they have psychological illness. Used to be worse in the 70s when no one would admit that they had depression or anxiety, and those are only 2 of many different ones. You can look up all the psychological definitions of illness in the DSM books that are put out by their medical community, but I think that people still have an issue when they're labeled as mentally imbalanced, chemically imbalanced, whatever you want to call it. The tough admission is there already, and sometimes the other problem is when you turn the camera around and introspect or evaluate yourself, it's kind of painful in some cases. I think we all have a preconceived notion that we're okay or kind of like everybody else. But when you start to scrutinize what has failed in my life to get me to being overweight or having irritable bowel syndrome or having depression, again, it's painful to realize until you admit to it, and then you can attack the reason for the change and then get healthy. But either way, when I ask patients to get grounded or take care of psychological stress, the usual response is, well, I'm not stressed out. And that's what I'll talk about now. And I'll tell you how stress, even if it's a little bit of stress every day, say fighting traffic in the morning, listening to the buzzer on your alarm clock turn on, trying to take care of bills in the afternoon, or trying to eat in a timely manner, on time, eat something that tastes good, eat something without guilt. Those are easy stressors. The obvious ones are when you're infected, when you have an injury, when you're being abused, verbally or physically abused, at work or at home. Those are obvious, but sometimes the not so obvious problems will make it difficult to realize how a change can come about. There is another article that was placed about how asthmatics, when given certain odors, and then given a label to those odors were phenyl alcohol. It's a neutral agent. It smells kind of like roses, but it doesn't cause any irritation. And there's a really cool article. Again, I'll put a link to it, but it kind of sampled a small population of moderate asthmatics. And if anybody knows an asthmatic, when you expose them to irritants like an incense that's burning, or exercise in some case, or dust, that asthmatic will have his or her asthma turn on, and then an inhaler will be necessary because there's inflammation that's occurring in the lining of the lung. The study exposed the people in the group to this neutral odor that is not supposed to cause any irritation, but it was kind of cool because the people that ran the study took half of the people that were in getting tested, and they exposed them to the odor for 15 minutes. They told half of the people, this is a gentle odor, it'll make you feel better. They told the other half, this might make your asthma turn on. They did that for 15 minutes, and they gave them a score to judge how they felt. If they were irritated, was the odor a noxious odor? Did it cause any asthma flare-up? Then they checked them after the test was done, a couple hours, and they checked them the next day. And it turns out that the people, which seems obvious, but the people that were given the suggestion that the odor was helpful, they didn't have a turn-on of their asthma. no irritation, no subjective complaints, and the tests that they did for determining how bad asthma, very sensitive tests, showed no inflammation in the lungs. The other half of the group that was given the impression or the perception that the odor would cause an asthma attack, they actually got an asthma attack. They had symptoms of asthma. And not only did they have symptoms, which you would figure would be obvious, you'd suggest that there's an ant that's going to bite you and you're going to die. You kind of get nervous, right? But the people that not only had the symptoms that they felt were irritating, they also had positive tests that showed inflammation in their lungs up to 24 hours later. And that's with a neutral agent. That's only with the power of suggestion. The reason I bring this up is because it's a great test to say that sometimes perception or ideas in the brain can turn on a physiologic response. Again, I'll repeat that. Sometimes an idea, the brain, thinking, will turn on the disease process. It sounds unheard of, perhaps, or if you know any asthmatics, maybe you can relate to this, but take it to the next level. If you have any form of stressor that's chronic day in, day out, whether you realize it or not, it can add to the inflammation that leads to disease down the line. Now, this is all hypothesis, but it's already proven that when you relax, when you go through 4-7-8 breath work, when you meditate, when you practice yoga, when you practice mindfulness, that blood tests of inflammation all decrease. Disease processes seem to respond better to either chemotherapy or medicines, or people get off medicines. Addictions seem to be easier to deal with. Medicines can be reduced. Rashes even go away. There are some suggestions that with warts that don't go away and hypnosis, they even get turned around. You'll have, even in the alternative community, some people that are hands-on healers, whether it's Reiki or the hands-on healing of Tui Na, even acupuncture. Even the gentle caress from a parent can sometimes make a cold and cough, a fever, get better. And you wonder why that happens. All the information is compounding over the last few decades, and it's coming because of science being so cool and detailed, and now we're in the forefront of diagnosing or even breaking down the human genome. We're finding that we can look for the reaction that occurs. So again, the bottom line is with stress, you have a fight or flight response. Whether it's a mild stressor or a big stressor, you'll initiate a fight or flight response. Judging from the reaction we're getting with the people who were studied, and that's a small subset, but it still proves a point, that you can have the stress response turn on the disease process. If you already suffer from several disease processes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, sugar problems, then in the cases where you have rampant disease, or you're on a medicine for each of those things and still it's getting worse every 5 years, you'll have more medicine, or your doctor will say, well, it's out of control, we have to change your medicine again. Even though you're on a good diet and you exercise like a fiend, you still are out of control. Sometimes the missing link will be taking care of that psychological stressor. And it doesn't mean that you have to have stress in your life. It just means that you have to be able to answer stress with relaxation. Relaxation practice is that. It's a practice. It's the opposite of, say, what the SWAT team does for pretending or going through scenarios. What the medical teams in the hospital will do to go through possible scenarios of heart failure or emergency medicine. Well, the body knows how to react to stress, but it doesn't necessarily know how to react to love or to relaxation, and that's why it must be practiced. It sometimes can be practiced with breath work. It sometimes has to be, you have to get on medicines to actually be able to practice breath work, or to be able to see a psychologist, or to be able to see a counselor. Sometimes some people are so anxious or depressed that they can't even go through 5 minutes of 4-7-8 breathing, or they can't sit through a session of counseling. or they can't bring themselves to even get to the doctor's office. So sometimes medicine should be started to daisy chain you into the therapy that might be necessary. And whether you call it therapy or relaxation meditation or breath work or getting out to nature and doing some meditative hiking or just standing in nature and getting away from the busy city just to smell the pine. I usually will, when I'm working, anybody who's been to my office will smell the aromatherapy. I usually have some oil that's being sent into the atmosphere in my office to initiate a little bit of a feeling. A lot of people who smell lavender will feel relaxed. And that's not hokey, that's actually studied by a lot of manufacturing companies. Those of you who buy dryer sheets, you'll know, or even detergents or soaps, you'll notice that a lot of smells that are injected into those things are lavender or forest or spring, and they smell like nature because people that are selling you product want you to feel, I like this, it feels good to buy this thing. So it is important to try to generate or practice the relaxation response. Regardless of whether you realize what your psychological stressor is, you're going to need guidance to practice or develop a practice of relaxation. You're going to have to practice it, and after you get the guidance or after you find a way in, it might be necessary to kind of reevaluate every once in a while. Everybody falls off the wagon, whether it's exercise, a good diet, or some relaxation practice. Everybody is allowed to kind of skip out every once in a while, but it's really important to get back to it. If you can't get back to it, or it's too hard to start up an exercise routine again, for example, then you go see a physical therapist, you go see an exercise physiologist, a personal trainer, a yoga therapist, and you kind of help get a new program started, something that might get the fire going again. Same thing with relaxation practice. If you did yoga before and it didn't work, or it's not working now, then you might have to go into Tai Chi, or you might have to take up hiking, or you might have to see a psychologist for one-on-one counseling. Either way, it's not as easy as it seems, but at the same time, once you get started and the ball rolling, once you realize that it is a very tangible problem that needs to be addressed because it will add to disease presentation. The paper that I mentioned earlier will show you that psychological stress can turn on disease. Anybody who's a diabetic will know that when you get stressed out, your sugars go up. When you get infected, your sugars go up. Is it because you're eating more? No. Most of my diabetics are very good. It's just because the stress response is turning on, it's not turning off, even when you're away from the danger. That usually is because either the adrenaline, norepinephrine, and epinephrine is still circulating, or you haven't been able to shut it down because you have no practice of relaxing. When you relax, you release the autonomic nervous system, either is the sympathetic or the parasympathetic. Most of us know the sympathetic, and we practice it, unfortunately, with drills in school, with sports, but we don't really practice the parasympathetic. Some of the professional players, NBA, baseball, football, will get to practice yoga. The Bulls, when they were in the 6-time world champion phase that they were, they actually had, they practiced yoga every season. I like to say it's because of the yoga that they got to world championship status, but obviously there is talent involved there. But you'll find that some of the pro athletes will go through visualization, will have a sports psychologist, will be able to kind of control the stress response so that in times of, say, foul shot shooting, in times of the last play of the season, of the quarter, the last hole that has to be hit and it's difficult, if you relax and you visualize, it makes the jitters go away, it makes concentration easier, you don't get the sweaty palms, and then you get to goal. Same thing with disease. You want to be able to control disease. And the best way is to control the way the body works, giving it a good, say, a good amount of grounding for nutrition and exercise. If your body's got the nutrients available, if your body has a conditioned response and it's healthy, And then if your body isn't fighting fight or flight all the time, it should be able to do what it was born to do, and that's live till 90 years of age without many medicines and be happy. So I think our inherent DNA is made to defend ourselves and get to 90 years of age. The unfortunate problem is we sometimes don't realize some of the poisons, some of the dangerous activities, and some of the stressful events that add to disease that usually knocks us down at the age of 40 to 50 with multiple medical problems and makes it difficult to go on.